provider. Welcome, Maree.
Hey, Karen, it's so good to be here. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. We're going to talk about your book, Worthy, that you've got there, and I've got here, and that's better. And it's, I think that we'll talk about that soon. I want to talk about some other stuff first, but I think that, the pandemic has really knocked some worthiness out of us, knock some confidence out. So hopefully as we go through this, we'll have some fantastic tips to, make everybody just get back up on their feet again and, feel good. But what I want to start with, you're really passionate about women, creating possibility, and particularly in rural areas, and regional areas. So tell us about your life, growing up. Like, where did this focus come from on women, but also the desire to really support women in regional areas?
Yeah, thanks, Karen. Being born and bred in a regional area, in a regional city as it is now, but it wasn't when I was growing up. The town that I grew up in, Traralgon, was a small country town when I was growing up. And I went to a secondary school that was 1,000 kids, so big for its time. But really, and then when I went off to university, the university campus had 600 internal students. It was smaller than my high school. So we're talking, I guess my experience as a regional young person formed my perspectives on the world, and also informed my perspectives on opportunity. Really, I've reached a point where probably in middle of my career, I got a bit bored with hearing so many people talk about the lack of opportunity in regions, the lack of opportunity for young people and for careers, and how closed-minded regional areas could be, and that the city was the only place where you could have a fulfilling life. I got really tired of hearing that, because whilst I can accept that in some regional and rural communities there are some barriers and people do struggle, that's not true of every regional community, and it's not true for every individual. So this idea that somehow we were the poorer cousins, that really used to grate with me. So, for me, it was really about the opportunity. You can be a really big fish in a small pond. You can have incredible experiences in rural and regional areas, and don't have to be cut off from the world and isolated in the way that we perhaps once were. The world is a very connected place now. And so you were talking about the impact of the pandemic, and isn't it interesting that we're seeing this revival in rural areas, because people are realising they don't have to live the metropolitan grind. They don't have to live in suburbia. They can move out and have really fulfilling, enriched lives, still have a job in the city, but not have to be in the city every single day. So I think, my experience of having a really great life in a regional community has probably underpinned my passion for helping other people to see that and to look for the opportunities that might be available to them.
I think that, you've said a lot in that, and I think, I always say when I do workshops, or, when I'm sort of talking about, getting off the bench and, helping people to do that, I say, you don't have to be rich, and you don't have to have been to uni, and you don't have to be living in the city, and, that sort of stuff. Like, and I use myself as an example. I'm just a country girl with no money. I don't mean that literally, but I'm not bloody born rich, and the opportunities are out there if you look for them, but two, if you've got the right people around you to to support, which is what you're doing with your programs. And when you're talking about creating opportunities, this is something that I do with one of my programs, and you teach the same thing, is that you start to create your own space. I think that in particularly in Melbourne, and I don't want to just generalize here either, the same as you don't, but there's so many jobs going and so many promotions around and so many opportunities that you're kind of waiting for the next thing to happen. But people don't move as much out here, and so if you're waiting for a promotion or something, it might not come for 10 years. So this whole premise about creating your own leadership opportunities and your own positioning, I think that's what I work with. I think that's so important. I love the fact that you're sort of grabbing onto that, that's what you're sort of trying to instill in people. I love it. So why are you focused on lifting women leaders? And I know that's kind of an obvious question, but like there's a lot of great men leaders, that come from rural areas, and yes. So why do women need that nudge? Like, I'm going to say this before you answer, right? There are already women in leadership positions in regional, right? And they're doing tremendously well. Yeah. But they still doubt themselves, and you support them not to doubt themselves. So why did you pick women, and how did you recognize this gap?
I think it's probably because I am a woman. I've probably felt on my skin the same sensations, the same pain, the same joy. I've asked myself the same questions. I've certainly been someone who had an inner dialogue that was, until you go and be a CEO in the city, you haven't made it. So all of that, probably informs the services that I offer now and the books that I write. And it's interesting because, we're focused on regional and rural women, and yet many of the women that I work with who are metropolitan based would say all the same issues exist for them. Yeah. This is not unique to living in a country area. This is really about, the self-talk that women have. But my choice is based around partly experience and expertise and, life connection, but also because, like you say, there have traditionally been fewer opportunities for women to lead in regional areas. They've led very effectively for centuries, for thousands of years. If we talk about our Aboriginal and First Australian sisters, they've been leading for a very, very long time. But I guess the opportunities now are quite different. So we are seeing more women in leadership roles and staying longer and having enormous impact on regional communities. And more generally, we've had a female Prime Minister in Australia at last. Hooray. But I think the self-doubt still exists for a lot of women. And so, what I'm driven by is unpacking that. What is it that's creating that doubt? We know that there are social structures. We know that the world we live in puts women in a particular position where, we're not having as many opportunities. And a lot of women are breaking through that. But there's something that we do to ourselves as well. There is something about our internal dialogue that needs to shift. And that's not to suggest that the self-talk shouldn't happen or that we shouldn't notice it and pay attention to it, but it's what we do with that once we've heard it. Let's reframe, let's get connected to where, what is this self-talk telling us, and where might it lead?
Yeah. Why do you think? Because you mentioned a few reasons there why women have got the self-doubt, the structures and aside and all that. Why do you think? Because many people talk about it, many people sort of work with it and all that sort of stuff. And why is it that doesn't matter how many times females are told, don't doubt yourself, you'll be right, you've got the skills, why is it that women continue to, you and myself included, I mean, it doesn't matter even if you're teaching it, you're still subjected to those feelings. I guess you would hope that if you're teaching it, you're at a point where you're recognizing it quicker and addressing it quicker. But what is it with women that?
I think there's a couple of things, and it's probably not unique to women, but we certainly talk about it a lot more.
Oh, yeah.
And I think men, in general, I mean, there's a sweeping generalizations, aren't they? But generally, I think we do. It is an affliction that affects us more. I've got a couple of theories. I'm no expert in this, but I have a couple of theories, and one is comparison. I think we do a lot of comparing of ourselves to other people. I'm not as brave as, I'm not as attractive as, I'm not as educated as, there's a list, 3 arms long of the things that we may not be as. There's also no shortage of advice out there. And I try really hard not to give advice, because I can only talk about what's worked for me, what's worked for my clients. Everybody's journey is individual and unique. So it's really interesting. One of my nieces-in-law shared a video on social media this week, which I just loved. I found it confronting, but I loved it. And it was, I don't know who it was, so I can't attribute, but it was a video recording of a woman reading over and over and over the range of advice that is given to young mums. Yep. Give your baby a dummy. Oh no, dummies are not good, or breast is best, but oh gosh, why are you feeding your child for that long? It was very confronting, but it's so true. I think I'm using that analogy because there is constant advice on social media, television, women's magazines, the bookshelves, everywhere we look. You cannot get away from it. There is advice about how to be a better woman, or how to be better in your career, or a better mother, or a better friend, or a better sister. I mean, for goodness sake, is it any wonder that we are constantly comparing ourselves to others and constantly questioning our own judgment? Because we are just bombarded with this stuff. And I guess my work is all about saying, quieten that down. Listen to you. What do you really want? What do you really want? And what are you really wanting to contribute to others? What are you bringing to the world? Forget all that noise. That's white noise. What else could be right for you?
Yeah. And it is so individualized, isn't it? And you talked about comparisons, and I was just thinking about all of the, particularly for middle-aged women, it's a little bit better now, but not a lot better. But the magazines, and like magazines are not so much now. Now it's more social media with influencers. But when you and I were younger, the magazines were just littered with all these gorgeous models, and of course you're going to compare, and if you're not quite up to it, then you're going to rebel so that you could be something different. And it's just and I agree with all this advice. You be a better this, be a better that. What if we are already good enough? And it's so personalized. What you reminded me of too is I used to teach disability, and I've said this on a few podcasts, is one of the, they were sort of mostly middle-aged women who were ready, they were like, oh, well, now what am I going to do? And they came to do the disability course to work with people with disabilities. But when I asked them partway through, what do you really want? I would have tears for weeks, because I don't know who I am anymore, and it was this constant pressure of, be a good wife, be a good mother, be a better mother, if you're out working, you're not a good mother. And it was just this constant barrage of, anyway, we could go down a bloody rabbit burrow there, because I reckon that stuff goes on forever. But and I don't think you can never address it all, but it's like you're saying, it's about raising that awareness to start thinking, what am I thinking? Could I be thinking differently? Could I just having some reflection on and noticing what's coming up? So I love that. The other thing is too, we're talking about, there are opportunities, that maybe there's less, but they're still there. But women don't put themselves forward as much. They don't have the confidence to put themselves forward. What have you noticed about that?
Well, there's the old adage that women will wait until they're 120% qualified or they'll put themselves forward. Now, there's a lot of pushback against that theory that maybe it's not quite to that degree. But there, when I think about the women I've worked with in my coaching programs and my group programs and women's workshops, the hundreds and hundreds of people that I've worked with, there's definitely a trend which suggests that we don't feel as ready, even when we are better equipped. And that's probably also connected to the fact that when we do put our hand up, it's been harder to get seen and be visible. And there's a lot of advice to women about how to be more visible and to be seen and all the rest of it. There's books and books and books on the bookshelves about that. So I think, coming back to your point, there is a tendency for us to put everybody else's needs first. And essentially, that's what my second book, Worthy, is all about, that we're less likely to step forward for ourselves until everybody else's needs are looked after. Yep. So I do think women are better at standing up and saying, I want this. They'll hesitate until the kids and their partner and their parents and everybody else is looked after, and they come last. And I guess what I'm wanting women to try and address is that perhaps getting in touch with your needs first is a priority, because you actually are going to be a better partner, friend, daughter, sister, employee, all of those things. You'll be better at that if you can connect with your own true self and feel some of those needs earlier. So yeah, I think stepping into leadership has become easier, or perhaps for a lot of women creating their own opportunity, creating their own businesses like you and I, not necessarily waiting for a man to get out of the way in a CEO job. Go and create your own, go and make your own adventure. There's an awful lot of that happening around Australia. But this sense of, well, I have to wait for everybody else to be okay before I do that for me. That's the trend that I notice. Yeah, I've noticed it too, and it makes sense, makes perfect sense to if I take care of me, I can then take care of those I love. But it feels counterintuitive. It feels wrong for women, and it's not like, I don't believe any of us as young girls were told, oh no, now you have to come last. You must come last. We weren't told that. Well, I mean, some maybe, but generalizing again, because I mean, we just have to generalize because we haven't got time to get into every goddamn nitty gritty of every single person. But it's none of us were really told that, but we've still adopted it. It's a funny and probably back to the comparisons again, it's and we may not have been told it in as many words, but there were lots of
cues,
components and cues and insidious messages that actually we do come last. And we think about the role models that we had, our grandmothers, our mothers, our school teachers. They actually did put themselves last. They actually did model that behavior. And that was rewarded as, the message from society was,
good mother,
good wife, she's a good mum, or she stayed home with the children and didn't go back to work until they were all through school. That was good parenting. She was a good mother. And she volunteered lots in the community. So all those insidious messages, nothing wrong with any of those things, by the way. Let's put that rider on it. But the message was, you're not good if you're doing something different. That there is something deficient in you if you chose something different. It's a little bit like my decision not to have children. I'm nearly 56. And back when I chose that, it was still kind of unusual. It wasn't unusual in my family. I had cousins overseas and an aunt here in Australia who didn't have kids, and so to me it was a choice I could make. But for a lot of women, that was a really scary, wow, you made that choice, wow. And so for me, that's an example of where we have given some really strong underlying messages to people. Unless you do things in this particular way, then you're not
Yeah.
really ticking the right boxes.
Yeah.
And I just don't think men have ever had that pressure. They've never had that level of expectation placed upon them. And that's, I think, the challenge that we face.
There's a lot of layers, isn't there? Like just stacks and stacks. It's not just one onion. I think we've got to peel back a whole bloody bag of onions. You know, those great big Hessian ones. You know?
Fields of them, growing.
Well, my role model was Susie Quattro, so I think I might have had different sort of, just go out there and get it and just tromp all over the world. But anyway, I love it. No, but it's just so right. Now, I think throughout your career, you've often been the only woman in the room because, it's only you talking about now. There's a lot of opportunities for women leaders, but I can think back even 10 years ago, when I was doing some some work when I was actually paid by someone else and could never bloody stand that lifestyle. But there are a lot more men in management positions, and there was just the odd woman. And often it was criticized, that woman, she must have big balls, because she's stepping up there with a man and, or she slept with someone, there's always these kind of conversations. Nobody ever said, oh, she's a great leader, she deserves to be there. It's all kind of like all these, really humiliating comments, to that woman. Now, you've been the only woman in the room, throughout your career. And how have those experiences, from being the only woman in the room, transferred to the ideals and concepts that you, teach and share today? Like, did that play a part?
Oh, for sure. And, equally, I've worked in environments where I've been in female-dominated industries as well. And interestingly, despite the female dominance throughout most of the positions in the organisation, the men have been at the top. So, yes, I've equally been in that environment as well as often being the only female at the table or in the room in different roles. And I guess what those experiences have taught me is that I don't want to be the only woman in the room. It's far, far better when you've got some bystanders and allies to support you. The other thing that it taught me, though, Karen, was where there were men that I could reach out to and say, hey, I'm feeling really strongly about this issue. I don't think I'm going to be heard in the same way unless I've got one of you backing me. So when this happens, when this guy decides he's going to shoot me down or say the exact same thing and make it his idea, I need you to back me up. So what I learned was to almost have preliminary conversations in advance of board meetings or group discussions or team conversations. I would position things so that I had my support crew in advance. So I knew, and now, that sounds like a crazy amount of extra hard work. And why did I need to do that? But if you think back 20 years, that's kind of what you had to do. You really, in order to be at the table, you had to be able to do those things. So almost thinking about who do I need in my pit crew here? And while I'm doing that, who am I looking behind me towards? Who are the women coming behind me that I can grab by the hand and help them up the ladder? It's not just for me to climb and go, come on up. I need to go back down and grab them and bring them with me. So, there's tactics and strategies that I certainly used in order to create more influence and buy myself some buddies to have at the table so that I didn't feel that sense of isolation and loneliness. It's hard. But the beautiful thing about today is we're seeing that change. Although, when you hear some of the experiences of some of the most senior women in this nation, even in the last 12 months, it's still not easy.
Terrible. Yep.
It's still not easy.
It's you remind me of that that meme where it's kind of like like a racetrack and the men have just got a clear path and the women have got to get over the washing machine and hang the washing out. It's all these obstacles. And what you're sort of saying is that you're adding you had to add, you felt you had to add. Not only are you competing with all these washing lines and Christ knows what, in the background in the family home, because that's, despite how good your husband is, you still got, there still has to be done. And then you've got this next layer of extra work where you're spending all this extra energy and time sort of building allies, building partnerships all around the place, simply so you could be heard. And I reckon that sucks. I can absolutely see the need for it, and I can absolutely see why you would do it, and I can see the strategy and how you would sort of set the scene for the other women coming up. But that just bloody sucks. That you should have to do that. And the other thing I'm thinking about that is that you had the I'll say the balls or the bravery or the courage or the strategy or whatever. You had the gusto to sit there and say, well, I want to be at this table, and if the only way I can do it is by getting these guys to ally with me. But there are so many women now who don't even have the courage or confidence or strength to gain those allies, and they go into this space completely. They're ambushed before they even get in there. They're finished before they get in there, and it's we've been talking a lot about to people a lot lately, and Leah Mather is one that talks about this a lot too, is that when there's another woman at the table, you as a woman make sure you say, hey, I think Rosemary had something to say, or do you have something to say? And I think we've got to get better as women, creating that space for other women to have the opportunity to say something. But it's a tough gig, isn't it?
It's like, it's carrying that mental load, isn't it? It's carrying the extra load. And this is where I think that, the men who are doing the work to support women in the workplace, this is where the male allies stuff is so valuable, because, having somebody at the table who says, actually, Bob, I think that's what Karen just said. I can go back to Karen's point, because I think this is the track that we're on. I'd like to hear more.
Yep.
That's the stuff where it really does have some power and some impact. And I did have a number of male champions who did that for me. They weren't mentors, they were sponsors and champions. They absolutely said, no, hang on a minute. That's what Maree was saying. Let's unpack that. Whatever they said at the time, it was really about, that's a great idea. Tell us more.
Yeah.
Rather than into the blokes.
Yeah. Well, I think it's easy to become very sexist and say, the men are just bastards and all this kind of stuff, but it's not actually true. And, and I don't get me wrong, I know some male managers that are absolute bloody pigs, that shouldn't be in that job, and just absolutely atrocious. But I would suggest that most men, except for the ones that have been there way too long, are genuine allies of women, you're coming forward. But I think that they're just not conditioned. They're just not conditioned to understand all of this stuff that's going on. But I think if you get the opportunity to speak to them and say, well, even if they were listening to this podcast going, oh shit, I didn't even realize that. I didn't realize all this extra mental load. Then they do come on board. And I think most men are great allies of women. I do believe that, because I've got so many great male mates, that just get it. But I think it's just those pig-headed dominating bastards that are just sitting there knocking everybody on their head. They're a challenge. But, somebody said the other day, it's only going to be another 10 years and a lot of them will be gone.
Yeah, and, you're so right. And I think it's also about... there is a difference. I was talking to a male CEO a few years back, where in an organisation where I was running a group program, and I asked him, what led you to run this program for the women in your team? What was it that inspired you to bring me in? What happened? And he said he'd had conversations with his team, who were predominantly female, about some of the challenges that they were facing in doing their work, and some of the barriers they were confronting, some of the sexism and biases. And they all talked about waking up in the morning and thinking, oh, I've got to do this today. I wonder if I'm skilled enough, equipped enough, brave enough, not feeling all that confident. And he said, I don't wake up in the morning and think, am I confident enough to do what I've got to do today? He said, it just never crosses my mind. As a bloke, I don't wake up and have those feelings. And I was staggered that my workforce was feeling like this.
Yeah.
Like, what can I do about that? Because that's not my experience. And he said, I don't think I'm an unusual man. I just think in general, men don't have that sort of self-talk. We might occasionally, there might be something that happens that distracts us or upsets us and we deal with it. But in general, we're not doing that to ourselves. And so he was really confronted by that and wanted to help, create a change in his workforce. And I thought that was a really powerful observation from him. And it did get me thinking about how, you're right, the majority of men would be fantastic allies, but they don't quite know how, and we're not having the conversations to help them. So it really is, it shouldn't be on us as women to help the men do the work. But now we've got so much more discussion about it and openness, and, we're talking about diversity and inclusion in different ways, that I think we're starting to have these discussions in a much deeper way, and that's fantastic.
But this is where the work you do that's so valuable. Because you're really talking about, we're both talking about, building assertiveness skills, and building worthiness, a sense of worthiness, building confidence, building all this courage, and so that women can actually, like that man's workforce, can actually step up and say, hey, did you know that I feel this and I don't want to feel this anymore? And they should be able to say it without the shame or embarrassment. But it's about being assertive. And a lot of the times women are passive aggressive. This is a generalization, but it's because we're taught, I'm not, can I be better? Am I confident? So we're sitting there in this sort of passive, we've been sort of pushed back a little bit to be passive. And then when we get challenged, oh no, we're not interested in what you've got to say, or we're overlooking you, we come out with aggression, like, you're not listening to me. And I'm not saying for 1 minute that all women are passive aggressive. That's not what I'm saying. But it is in a lot of situations in the workforce where it's male dominated, it's almost a default position, because there's no other way to get that voice out, and the stuff that you're teaching, the stuff that you're working with women is so valuable, because while you're not actually outwardly saying, I'm teaching you assertiveness skills, through the work you do and building them up and making them helping them to understand who they are and reflect on what's important to them and what skills they actually do have that they may have overlooked, that brings this level of assertion, up, and they're able to have those conversations. So I think the work you do is truly valuable in that way. Well, in a lot of ways, but like I'm just specifically thinking about that. I love that. Love what you're doing. Love it.
And, you made a beautiful point, Karen, about, people being able to see their own value. And, it's all about context, isn't it? Yeah. And it, this is where the book came from, because, until we discover our own worth, until we stop seeing our own development, investment in ourselves, until we stop seeing that as self-indulgent, then, nothing will shift. But once we're able to say, when I invest in me, when I invest in my development, when I invest in my own self-care, that's not self-indulgence. That's actually making me a better person for the people that I love and care about, and for my workplace. It's actually getting in touch with yourself and understanding the things that you're good at, that the things that you value, what drives you, your personal vision, all of that stuff really matters, because it enables you to operate within the world in a much more powerful way. We can't be empowered if we don't know who we are.
Yeah.
So, for me, that really is step one. Get to know you, get to know what drives you. It's not self-indulgent. It's really important.
Yeah, it really is. But I still think we've got a long way to go, because we're still back. We've still got a lot of those, a lot of the dregs hanging on from the past, that tell us that we don't put ourselves first. But I think it's changing. I see that changing, and I see a lot more women, recognizing and particularly since the pandemic, self-care has been put on the table more. It's been, people saying, what are you doing? Go and see somebody, or work with somebody, or get a mentor, this sort of stuff. The conversation has been a lot more put out there, not in a judgy way, not in a kind of like, oh God, you need a mentor, oh God, you're doing person. It's been true. The value of it has truly been put out there to say, you really need to do this, or if you don't, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you do this for yourself? So I think it's shifting, and I think the pandemic's probably given a real beautiful nudge in that direction, that women are starting to invest in themselves more. And
yeah, and I think we're having different conversations as a consequence, aren't we? Even as much as the pandemic has created real challenges for people with their mental health in many respects, the fact that we're even having that conversation has to be a plus. 10 years ago, we probably wouldn't have been talking about that stuff, and it's kind of been revolutionary and evolutionary. In my opinion, it's really shifted the conversations that we're having. It's changed the fact that we're talking about the difference between the haves and the have-nots, to use language that I particularly like. But we are looking at, what do we do about the people who have been left behind in society? What do we do about, the glaring differences that we've noticed between men and women, between people of privilege and people without, between people of colour and people who are experiencing white privilege, not to mention all the other different diverse groups in our society. This has made us really present to who we are. And even the division in society around the people who would be talking about mandatory vaccination versus not. It's really shone a light on who we are as a society. And I think that's not a bad thing. Yes, there have been some negatives that have emerged, but this idea of, well, who do I want to be? And how will I care for me so that I can care for others? In a way, it's reconnected us with servant leadership. I think it's pretty powerful. I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, I do too. I think that it's very easy to be negative about the pandemic, and you know what, it's had a lot of negative impact on people. But I agree with you. I think that there's a silver lining in this, that if we keep nurturing that silver lining, we're likely to have a much better society than we had before. And we're here. I am doing the better, much better. But I actually don't think we were doing that well. I really don't think we were doing that well as a society. And we still had a lot of flaws and a lot of comparisons and a lot of racism, there's just a lot of stuff that wasn't working. And yes, we're going through a hard time now, but I think it's going to bring us through to a different and a better level. I think kindness is starting to shine more now, and we're noticing, like you say, the have-nots, and I don't like that language either, but people that we could have overlooked before, that could have been overlooked before, they whatever, but now it's kind of like, well, it's same as the men and the women talk, it's kind of like, well, I didn't realise, and it's taken a situation to bring that stuff to the surface and to make other people realize, well, I've always wanted to help, but I didn't realize I didn't know what I could do. I didn't know what the problem was, and it's the same thing. It's conversation, isn't it?
It is. It's opening up discussion, and I think it comes back to my point about when we get to know ourselves and we know what we value, we start to see the world in a different light. So if, for instance, you discover that your personal values are not congruent with the work that you're doing, it can trigger a whole lot of questions, can't it, around, I'm working in an environment where it's driven by, pure profit. Again, nothing wrong with that. But if your values are not about that, and you realize that, I actually feel like a square peg in a round hole, and I'm not feeling good about myself, and it's undermining me, and I don't believe in the work that I'm doing, that has ripple effects throughout your whole life. It starts to undermine everything, and that unhappiness is, infiltrating. And so once you get to know who you are and what you value and what's driving you, you can make some different decisions. You've got the capacity to make some different decisions. And it might be to go and serve the community in some way. It might be to stay in your job, but add something else that's missing from your life. So it's being able to invest in yourself in that way, invest time, energy, reflection, and money, perhaps, enables you to chart a different course. It really, it's really coming back to that true north stuff.
Yeah, I agree. And I think this is, again, I'm going to say this is the value of the work you do. It's that we need to, what we don't do is we don't, even if we feel I'm worthy, I'm valuable, I know I am, but I'm not investing in myself. We often will not, as women, will not stop long enough to do what we have to do, and so when people come and work with you and, do this type of personal, who am I, what's going on for me? What do I really want? We're forced to stop even if it's only for an hour a week or whatever it is, it's a block of time that is forcing us to actually stop and reflect. And it's only in that stopping, I truly believe this, it's only in that stopping that we can find out who we are. Because while we're rushing, I know who I am, and I'll think about it later. I just got to cook dinner, or I just got to buy. We don't really stop. We kind of like see something. Oh, I like that. Yeah, I really do like candles. Well, but then I'm off. I'm not going to buy it because I've got too rush. But that stuff doesn't build who we truly are. It's just passing thoughts about what I like and what I don't like. But I think that, you're right. We have to invest in some way to say, I'm going to stop because I'm valuable enough to stop. Some women don't even have a bath, and I didn't have. We've been in this house 4 years, and I only had my first bath in here, a few weeks ago, and I was like lying in there thinking, oh my God, this is nice. Why haven't I done this before? But it's just that got to go. So I love you. I just feel like we're going down a big rabbit burrow, and I haven't even asked you about your book yet. But I think I wanted to ask.
But
you,
I've been weaving it in there.
Yeah, I know, which is fantastic. I just want to ask you about your first one first, and then I want to ask you a bit more about Worthy. But you wrote Cutting Through the Glass Ceiling in 2017. So tell us about that, because then I want that to lead on to the next bit. But tell us about that book.
Yeah, so that book, Karen, was it had kind of three elements to it. It had sort of the argument around why it's really important for regional economies to have women participating at their best capacity, be that in the labour market or in the community, how we all benefit, how the nation or the world benefits when regional and rural women get to participate in the way that they choose. So there was a lot of front end kind of discussion about why that matters. Then there was really the foundations of my pillars of possibility stuff. The very early thinking around those 5 pillars was part of that book. And of course, that's been refined a bit more. And then finally, there was the last section was a series of interviews that I did with a number of women that I admire, who have had a regional or rural background and have created some impact. And they ranged from my hairdresser right through to someone who'd been the state secretary of a political party. So really diverse women who all talked about, and in fact, another was a member of the House of Representatives in the federal parliament. So, women who'd had very diverse experiences. rural or regional childhoods and adolescents, and talked about what it was like to follow their dreams or, understand their values. So in a sense, it was a precursor to the second book. They're very different, and yet it's kind of evident where Worthy came from after having had conversations with those women.
Yeah. So tell us about Worthy then. So so we're talking about 3 years apart. So 2007, no, it's 4 years apart, actually.
Yeah.
2017. Yeah. What, because you've been doing all this work with regional leaders and, women and through the cutting through the glass ceiling. I mean, that just didn't happen. And then you decide, I'm going to start coaching. I mean, you've been doing this for a long time, and that book came from a lot of your learnings. At what point, you reckon, did you start to think, do you know what? A lot of the barriers is people's worthiness. Like, when did you start to see that and build on that and think, I need to write this damn book? Well,
there was one woman in particular that I met who really affected me emotionally, and I talk about her in the introduction to the book, which you will know because you've read it. So that encounter with her randomly at a dinner function in another part of the state really affected me. She was deeply moved, and to the point where she couldn't really stay and continue the conversation. She'd uncovered a whole lot of stuff talking randomly to somebody next to her at a dinner. Clearly I was somebody who was providing a kind and curious ear, and her sense of regretfulness and wistfulness was what struck me, all the what ifs that she was grappling with. And, that sense that maybe she had settled for rather than aspired to. All the stuff that she talked about was, kind of settled for this. And she had a great life. There was nothing wrong with the life that she was living. And to all intensive purposes, other people would have looked at her and thought, oh, you're really privileged. You've done really well. But there was an emptiness in her, which was about all the stuff that she hadn't pursued. And I guess the message that I was trying to give her was, it's not too late. You can still do those things. You can still turn your attention outward and do some great things for other people, while still putting your needs first. Those two things don't have to be in conflict. You can have them together. So that was a really powerful conversation. And what that did was got me in touch with what so many of my clients were saying in workshops, in corporate programs, in one-to-one sessions. There was a sense of wistfulness about all the things that people hadn't achieved, that women, the voice in their head which was saying, I should have done this, but I haven't, or it's too late for me to do this, or I could have had that, or I have to wait for that because I've got to look after everybody else's needs. So it got me thinking about, this is so us about, if I can use that language. This is so wrong. Because, what they're not seeing is that they can give all of that to other people because they've given to themselves first. They're going to be able to be so much more effective in their lives because they're fulfilled. I have to find a way to communicate that message. And there were also a few women that I met who had invested in themselves. So they, for a lot of the women who come to me for one-to-one coaching, sometimes they're employer sponsored, but in a lot of cases they're not. They're saying, no, I actually want to have my control or my sense of agency over this for myself. So I'm going to make sure I invest my funds. I'm going to do this for me. Because they've reached that point where they know if they wait for somebody else to make it happen for them, they're going to be waiting for an awfully long time. So, in a way, they gave me the gift of teaching me the value of being able to do that for themselves, watching the outcomes that they achieved, really powerful. So there's a number of their stories in the book as well. And it's really about helping women to see that if you take those barriers away from yourself, and this is even for people who you might not have thousands of dollars to invest in yourself. It might be simply time. It might be giving yourself reflective space every now and again. Or it might be attending one workshop a year if that's all you can afford in the work that you do. You do this on the basis of what's going to work for you. And, it might be going off and doing a master's degree, or it might be spending $500 a year on your development. Whatever works for you, nothing is wasted. It's about getting in touch with, honouring yourself in that way, and saying that, I am worthy of this.
Yeah.
He's going to help me be a better person and more effective with my place in the world.
Yeah. And I think also you're talking about your self-investment, that sort of stuff. If you've got and you said there's 1,000 books, all telling you what to do, but if including get off the bench, tell you what to do. But often you need one, that person to hold the space for you while you're not being told what to do, but you're feeling your own stuff coming up. And I'm a big believer in when you hear it come out of your own mouth, it springs back at you and you go, true or not true? Good or not good?
Who said that?
Yeah, God, why have I been believing that? But it's also the bit about, if you've got some skin in the game, that you've got an accountability buddy as well, even if you're paying someone, but you're also investing money. And so, you get a lot more reason to actually make it work. But it was interesting you said in there about talking to that woman at the dinner table and filled with regret. It's that is just such a common thing that I've heard too so often. And this settling, I suppose I'm stuck with it now. Oh well, that's the choice I made. Oh well, that's the hand I've been dealt. That kind of stuff. And the sense of, well, I'm too old now. But it almost seems ridiculous that you have to say to people, no, you're not. But I remember reading an article about a guy who wrote his very first book when he was 81. And I mean, how fantastic is that? Because I don't think we're ever too old or too young or to anything to claim back our life. And to put that worthy stick in the ground and say, I am worth it. I am worth it. And, well, tell us, what are people going to get out of the book? Like, what's the, I was going to say if I buy it, but I already did. Here it is. Probably not the answer, but, just for everyone, like, I grab this book, what's it going to leave me with? What am I going to walk away feeling worthy, I imagine, but apart from that.
So, my hope for people, Karen, is when they read it, yes, they get in touch with their sense of self-worth, that they stop mauling their mojo and straighten their self-talk. But more importantly, it's about create your life with intention. Don't live with regret. Don't look back and say, I wish I had done. Now, we're all going to have those things. We're all going to get to our deathbed and think, I wish I had. Yeah. Of course we will. That's human nature. But I guess what I'm saying is think about the things that really matter to you most and the people that matter to you most. And, don't be wistful about that. Find a way to create the opportunities that you want for yourself, and there will be people to help you. Yeah. And the intent of the book is Yes, there's stories from clients and people that I know. There's stories about some quite famous people as well. There's tips and tricks and information that you can use, but there's also exercises at the end of each chapter that you can do, reflective exercises, questions to ask yourself. So what I'm finding a lot of readers are telling me is that they're reading the book once because it's a nice, quick, easy read. You can read it in one setting if you really want to. And then they're going back and going chapter by chapter and doing the work that's in each chapter. Yeah. So a lot of people are getting the experience of doing it that way. And that's really nice for me to hear that it's having that impact.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And it is a really easy, well, you sit in one sitting, unless you're Karen, because I'm not a read a whole book in one sitting person, but it is actually it is very easy to read. I look at those books that are like in about 8 font, and I think, oh my God, and I just put it down. I'm not reading that. But it's a really nice. It is a really easy read. But I like and I like the idea of coming back. Because when you put those exercises in it, most people don't do them. They don't pause because they're always like, "Oh, what's next?" So the whole reading it and then coming back, I think, is a fantastic thing. When you say stop mauling your mojo, what do you actually mean by that?
There is a subchapter in there about this very topic, Karen, and it's when we compare ourselves to other people, when we think I want what she's having and I don't have the same as everybody else, that just seriously undermines the way you think about yourself. Yeah. The more we do that, the more that women do that, the more they start to see themselves as somehow lacking or deficient in some way. It's like they haven't got enough vitamins. Really, really stop it. And it comes to your point early on, you are enough. You are enough as you are. And if you want to add to that and amplify and elevate and create more for yourself, woohoo, I'm all for that. And this book will help you. But you are enough as you are. Stop mauling your mojo, stop undermining yourself, and get that negative talk out of your head as much as you can.
You hit on such a bloody important bit there, is that we've all got mojo. We all kind of like, oh, I wish I was like her. I wish I could dance like her. She's got the funky moves. She's got comedy. She's got speaker. She's this and that. But we've all got our own little package of mojo that if we truly step into it and we embrace it and we nurture it and say, this is me and I'm staying in my own lane and I'm going to amplify that. And I don't necessarily mean like you said as in amplify and do great things, but just amplify that my mojo. That's when people are attracted to us. That's when people believe in us.
Totally. Totally.
So I love that you're saying stop mauling your mojo, because if we just loved our mojo and just stepped into it, imagine all these little mojos walking around the place. It'd be fantastic.
I love what you say, because it's, it really is about this is who I am, and I can grow little by little. I can keep exploring the world and getting that little bit better every day. It's a lovely intent. Yeah. And you're right, people are attracted to that. They do, you give off great energy. And it's, for me, it's about when I know myself better, I can only speak for me. I really can't give advice to other people. I know what's worked for me. I know what's worked for my clients. I know the stuff that I've been taught that served me well. And when I turn my attention inwards to be a better human, I then can turn my attention outwards. Yeah. To create better things for the people that I care about and for the world. And, it's, I'm worth that. I'm absolutely worth that. And that's the message I want other people to take away.
And I was just thinking, as you were saying, and I was just going to wrap up before I ask you the get off the bench question, I was just going to wrap up all of it by saying that the big message out of all this is that you're worth it And if you take care of yourself first, you're going to do a much better job externally. And you just wrapped it up in a nutshell, just absolutely perfectly. So, I love that. So the whole podcast has been about that. And if you get Maree's book, Worthy, it's just about that. It's about you are worth it. So step into you, and then you'll be a much better you for everyone else that you're trying to care about now. So I just love it. I've loved all of this. I know we've just been down all these rabbit burrows, but I absolutely love it. And we have not been bagging men. So if anyone thinks it's been a man bashing session, it has not. So now the get off the bench question, of course, because this podcast is, to inspire people to get off the bench. You've done it. You've done it not only twice with your books, but also with your, starting up your own business and your coaching, but you also do it many times because you invent new programs and all that sort of stuff, and move with what's needed. So you're a master at getting off the bench. What advice would you give to a woman who knows she has great leadership capacity, knows it in here, but just won't step up because of a shitty internal dialogue, which we all know about, we've talked about, or a belief system that says women don't belong here, but she knows she'd be great at it? What advice would you give her?
Oh, what advice would I give her? Well, first up, I'd say read Worthy. Read the book, because that will challenge some of that internal dialogue.
Yeah, good.
I would also say get curious about where that inner voice is coming from. What has led you to believe that, and how did you come to that conclusion? Think deeply about that, and then reframe it by saying, so what else could be true?
Yeah.
I reckon, if you know in your head, if you know intellectually and in your gut that you're ready for leadership, you're ready to step up, and that you can do this, but something inside of you is holding you back, I reckon get curious. What is this? What is this block? Because it'll be a fear of some sort, is my suspicion. My hunch would be, and a lot of women will tell themselves they're fearful of failure, and I actually want to hypothesize that maybe it'll be fear of success instead.
Yeah.
Get curious about that. Challenge what that fear is really about. And when you've done that, seek out some other women who have got off the bench and done what you think you would like to do. Yeah. And watch them, watch what they do, visualize if they were in your shoes, what they would be doing. Yeah. And if you know them well enough, connect with them, take them out for coffee, find out their story. I think it's not about comparing, it's about learning from and invest in you. Go and get some help. The other bit of advice would be, Karen, that we can't do this stuff on our own. And it's a mistake to think that any of us can. Nobody does. Even the people that we put on a pedestal, they haven't got there by themselves. They've got people around them. So, get your support crew and get some help.
Yes, I love all that. Get your support crew. You can't do it on your own. I love the fact that you're saying, asking that, where does this come from? Because I think we don't do that enough. We need to do that more. Buy the book, of course, buy the book. And I love you. I love your question. And you've triggered me to think, I think I read that in your book, that what else could be true? I'm very sure I read that in there, but it's, look, I've absolutely loved this. And now the people are going to want to find you. So where can they find you?
Yeah, look, they can find me on all the usual platforms, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and of course through my website, which is mareemcpherson.com.au. And I'll welcome any contact from people. Love to know people's thoughts about, what they've heard today. Love them to send me messages about, what they've read in the book. And most importantly, if people are interested in knowing more about the work that I do, the website's a really great place to find out more.
Yeah, and I'll put all the show notes, all the links in the show notes and all that kind of stuff. And now I'm going to go and have to, because you put me on the spot, I'm going to go and have a look, flick through this and go, what the hell was my favourite spot? I have absolutely loved this. It's just been a wonderful conversation, and thank you so much. And hope everyone reaches out to you, because you're just a bloody gem. You're amazing. You're fantastic for the Gippsland region, and you're a fantastic advocate for regional women, to promote themselves, and I don't mean, you know what I mean, just get themselves up there and out there and believe in themselves and feel worthy. So thank you so much for coming on, and thanks for sharing all your wonderful wisdom.
Thanks for having me, Karen. I loved it, and you've made me laugh, made me think hard. You've asked some wonderful questions, and yeah, it's been a joy. It's been an absolute joy.
Fantastic. All right. Well, I'm looking forward to that coffee now. So, or dinner. We're having dinner. Yes. So we must do that. So, all right. We'll catch up with you very soon next week. Okay. See ya.